So the first thing to note is obviously you're seeing Neugo here. So Neugo is our fresh branding, which is around our kind of new innovation, or the new innovation around ways of working, kind of remote hybrid working. So we're the company, we're called Flabba. That's our limited liability company, but our product range and all our solutions and services around that, this kind of remote working and new ways of working, is called Neugo. So hence why you'll see Neugo all over my presentation. So yeah, I'm just going to take you through just a standard deck. I think we've all been experiencing at least some form of remote working, maybe kind of hybrid working is a term that's been used a lot, sort of flexible working. But I think obviously the last sort of 2.5, 3 years has just accelerated everyone's need to have these kind of toolings available. And I think since we've come out of the kind of COVID, we're now seeing lots of adoption of this kind of tooling, and there's various different pitfalls from that. And I'll try and walk through this and give you sort of our views of it. But perhaps give you a bit of an insight into some of our tooling and what we like to bring to market, and also some of the comments that we've been getting from customers, which might resonate with yourselves as well. But I'd really like this to be, rather than me just talking at you guys, if you've got any particular topics that you want to go or scrutinize, or anything that I'm saying, just please feel free to jump in. Otherwise, you'll be sick and tired of the sound of my voice. So first things first, let me try and get. There we go. Okay, right. So just briefly, this is just a diagrammatic sort of view of kind of collaboration history, so remote working history. And we're obviously going very obviously here from telephones through to kind of group telephone chats, through to the advent of emails. And for those of us slightly older who certainly remember emails coming on board, that was a kind of wow moment. And then looking at more sort of documents and collaboration, and then messaging. So collaboration tools through direct messaging, through to the mobile evolution, and then going to, look at what we're doing. So now Teams and Zoom and kind of that video space. This is kind of the technology advancements that we've had, over the last 20, 30 years. And where we are really now, and where we kind of sit as Neugo, is in this final sector. So we're taking video communications tools like your Microsoft Teams and your Zooms, which are fantastic if we want to speak to friends and colleagues. Sorry, it was for friends rather, and family. If you need it for business purposes, there's a whole load of ancillary software and tools and functionality and workflows that you need to go and make those remote engagements fit for purpose. And I'll talk about those in a second, but this is where we sit in. So it's making remote working and remote working tools fit for your specific business operational purposes. More of that in just a second. So we're looking at kind of the rapid evolution that we've had, and the pandemic has massively accelerated the adoption of some of these tools. But what we saw ourselves, and you guys will no doubt attest this as well, was during the pandemic there was an awful lot of people screaming and shouting, or certainly business areas were screaming and shouting at their IT departments and say, hey, look, how am I going to keep in touch with my customers and or clients, whatever it may be, but how are we going to keep in touch with them, because we can't obviously see them face to face anymore. So this accelerated the adoption of a load of remote tooling, video conference in particular. I mean, there was a lot of, we did a lot of work in healthcare as an example, and there's a lot of resistance prior to COVID to go and use video conference tooling to carry out consultations. It just wasn't perceived to be the way to do things. And then suddenly, obviously, COVID hits, and everyone is out trying to get video conferencing tooling. So this really did massively accelerate, I guess, the adoption and use of these kind of tools. But it also then started to create more headaches. I'll give you an example. So we did some stuff with Guy's and St Thomas's up in London. Their IT department was being screamed and shouted at by all the doctors and consultants and nurses, saying, look, we desperately need to get and speak with our patients. How do we do this? So they thought, oh, I know what we'll do. So they bought several £100,000 worth of licenses of a technology called Blue Jeans. And Blue Jeans, for those who don't know, is a video conferencing platform, and thought, there you go, problem solved. Well, they then got, again, more knocks on the door, and about a week later saying, now you've created so many more headaches for us because it's just a video conferencing platform. and to the point that I started off at the end, start of this presentation, it's just a video conferencing tool like Teams and Zoom. It doesn't have all the other different tools you need to be able to manage those remote. In this instance, this is a remote consultation. So booking and scheduling and recording and saving it against a patient record and reporting against that, note taking and all these things, it didn't have it. So that started to go and certainly accelerate the use of remote tooling, but then started to open up some of the challenges or the gaps between what's needed and what was currently available at the time. We're going into kind of post-pandemic. There was, I think everyone, again, you guys might want to keep me honest here, there might be some who didn't, but certainly in our experience, everyone who experienced using remote toolings, let's say video conferencing tooling, and working in a hybrid or in totally remote fashion, found there were efficiencies to be made by using this tooling. And this tended to be cross sector. And it also went down to, to deeper rooted things like, employee welfare and the work-life balance. And lots of companies, as well as that, they found themselves that actually the efficiency of their staff from an operational delivery perspective was far more improved, because they're not having to go and, take vast commutes and the likes, and they feel as if they're more relaxed working in their own home environment, and therefore they tended to get up perhaps earlier. I know certainly my wife, as an example, she was, but she's kind of an anathema, but she was up at kind of 6 in the morning and sometimes working because she could, and she didn't need to go into work. Okay, so it was kind of post-pandemic, started to create a sense of reality that technology was actually good, and this new sort of remote working technology was certainly something to be considered, certainly for the longer term. So some of the challenges, perhaps, I suppose, in technology, certainly prior to COVID, was perhaps even simple things down to broadband connectivity speeds. Working remotely, we've all seen buffering. I think a few of us there were experiencing some buffering as well. So it still persists, especially in places as lovely as the New Forest, perhaps doesn't have the best connectivity speed. So that can be a blocker. But there's also other things around the adoption of technology, which I'll go to perhaps later on as well, that there's a perception that the use of the technology to carry out certain things dilutes certain elements of their working practices. I'm thinking, if people are working remotely, there's a typical kind of CIO kind of gripe is, well, I'm losing innovation. I'm losing control of operating practices. And these are valid points, right? But there's ways in which we can overcome them. Now, the future workplaces I'm kind of alluding to beforehand, this technology is not going anywhere. It's here to stay. If you take somewhere like healthcare, an example, the NHS is actually stipulating, this has come down from the government, that they want 30% of all initial consultations, so this is your initial engagement with your GP surgery or otherwise, to be done remotely. And typically that's the use of multiple user things that you guys may have been familiar with, but it also includes the likes of video communication tools. So that's just one industry sector. We're seeing many other industry sectors where they're actually totally working remotely. So they'll need to have this kind of tooling to help them persist in the future. So remote working tooling is most certainly here to stay. Some of the things around kind of fors and against, and if I sort of dwell on the kind of fors around remote working tools, I've touched on some of them before, productivity, time saving, wellness, the flexible work-life balance. I think we all agree. I think that's something that does resonate well with employees. And I think that what that starts to then create is a sense that if you're not providing these or this at least hybrid working environment, then you may potentially run the risk of losing out your staff or potential new hires to competition, because I think the workforce are becoming smart to this, and they realize that there are better ways of working which is better for them. So the more insightful and forward-thinking employers are very cognitive of it, and they start to use this kind of tooling to help retain and improve the welfare of their staff. Against, I touched on some of these as well. I mean, damage to corporate culture. I mean, there's a perception that, how are we managing to go and get across the right kind of messaging or the culture within an organization if we're not seeing each other face to face? Again, it's a valid point, but again, with using the right kind of tooling, that can be mitigated against. I touched on the water cooler movement, very Americanized phrase, but is the innovation being lost? in our personal experience, we're finding that innovation is actually enhanced because people can communicate with each other much quicker and much easier, and they don't, and actually and save those comments as well and comment on those comments using the technology, so they're actually stored too. Productivity and quality concerns. This is really around there's the management of the old school management perception that if I can't see the whites of someone's eyes, how can I be assured that they're doing what they should be doing? Okay, and that's a common perception. If we look, and also in some of our tooling, we've got built-in workflows that help you fully manage that. You set up the workflows to say, this is what this team does, regardless of whether they're in the office or whether they're on a bus or working remotely from home. They can go in there and carry out their tasks, and you can go and see through a traffic light system how those tasks have been carried out and where they are and who needs to do what and when. So technology can really enhance some of these perceptions perceptions against the use of remote tooling. I can share this deck, by the way, with you guys as well, because it's quite a lot for us to go through, so you can have a look in your own mind. You guys wanted me to talk a little bit around some of the tooling that's out there. And this is, a fairly broad brush, and you'll be familiar with most of this kind of tooling, but we've set it into 3 key categories. So video conferencing, we're obviously using one of them in Zoom, which appears in the left-hand circle there. Microsoft Teams, there's a load of other ones in here. I mentioned Blue Jeans, obviously, with Guys and Thomas's as well. So lots of video conferencing tooling. And then you've got collaboration and messaging kind of tools. You guys may or may not be familiar, but you've got Slack is probably one of the bigger ones. Yammer for corporate messaging, corporate kind of social platforms. And then around workflow management, so tooling. This is Trello, which is around project management. HubSpot, again, similar to project management like Excel spreadsheets, but on steroids. And we kind of we sit right in the middle of all 3 of these, because we've got video conferencing built into us as all around tooling to help with collaboration and all the messaging tools, and I'll show you some of that in a second. And then most importantly is about workflow management, and I'll touch on that in a little bit more, but we're all about that workflow management. So how can you manage that the workflows of your members of staff, even though you're working remotely? One of the big bugbears, as I mentioned, that CIOs have, we cover that off. Just some pain points. You may find them resonating with some of them, but around meetings and meetings being unnecessary. This is kind of pain points with a hybrid, a blend between existing meetings, which are face-to-face meetings, and then obviously some of the stuff in here as well is all about that hybrid related stuff. I think in the 5th one down here, our meetings don't follow a structure and time is being wasted. I think that's something that I think, certainly from our experience using video conferencing tooling, sometimes there could be more of a sort of relaxed approach to the meeting. It doesn't necessarily follow the formal structure. We've got tooling built into our platform that enables you to set topics and agendas, and the leader of the meeting would take you through those agenda items, and each question would come up, and you've got an ability to write your notes and comment on it. So we cover a lot of these pain points that we've been finding, and the kind of areas here, these are typical business leader kind of gripes. We've managed to solve an awful lot of these problems through our platform, the innovation of our platform. So some of the issues, and we just took 4 sort of industries here. Our platform, actually, Neugo is industry vertical kind of agnostic. It's more around specific use cases that you may wish, so we can be used in any particular environment. But we'll just take these 4 just to give some illustration. There's some gripes I mentioned here. So recruitment, this obviously persists across all organizations that are all looking to go and recruit. I mentioned competition for talent. That's something that's super key. This new working or new ways of working, if you're not deploying new ways of working through remote tools, you're going to lose out to the competition to talent. There's a lot of research around that as well. If you look at financial services, regulatory and compliance, when you're conducting meetings, typically the way that's been done historically, it would be done face-to-face for a highly regulated meeting. excuse me, just refreshing my palate, for a highly regulated meeting be done typically face-to-face. There's so much more innovation that can be brought to play, which doesn't dilute the regulatory compliance, but enables you to be able to see people regardless of where they are, what the diary conflicts may be, using the remote working tooling. And simply by, and again, our platform does this, and forgive me if I'm shouting a good shout about Neugo, but I'm very proud of what we've done here. Our solution does cover off a lot of these pain points. And for something like regulatory compliance, you need to be able to record what's being said during a remote meeting and be able to index against that client record, so you can go back and audit it or review it or have an oversight view to make certain that it is fully compliant. We provide that kind of structure and workflow in place. But I guess I can go through all of them. What there tends to be is kind of, there is a commonality across these. You probably can't see the one in yellow because it's for some reason it's gone in white, but you've got, so down the bottom three: talent retention, security, reduction in carbon. These are three key elements that are top on people's lists of things to be concerned about, and the inboxes of certainly the C-suite within sort of a small up to SME and enterprise organizations. Talent retention, we've spoken about. Security is clearly key when we're looking at people working remotely. That becomes a real painful bugbear. How can we ensure that everyone's going to be super secure and locked down? And we'll cover that and perhaps in a second. The last one is obvious. Reducing the carbon footprint. Not only is it very in vogue, but organizations are actually building their businesses around this as being a unique selling point, and something to be talking about, and using remote tooling, aside from all the other great benefits you can get. I mean, it's a massive one on this. We do something on this built into our dashboard. There's kind of a carbon footprint analysis tool that says how many meetings you've done and therefore how much carbon footprint you're saving as well. So all really good stuff to give you tangible ROIs on the investments you're making from a technology perspective. This is kind of broad brush stuff here, but this is going into more our solution. I've given you a bit of an insight into the market and how it's evolved and how people are using remote working tools. Our solution, broadly speaking, it takes the remote meetings, but it sort of wraps them around with business processes and workflows to make them fit for specific purposes. I touched on it before, but broadly speaking, if you're using sort of Zoom or Teams, as Zoom we're using here, aren't we? There's the booking and scheduling, which I saw that we got the booking scheduling done in, but automatic emails being sent from that one interface that can be checked and verified to make certain everyone has got the right kind of invites. Virtual interactive waiting rooms where they can be fully interactive and you can bring people in as and when, down to integrated document management, which is something that we have. So to carry out meetings, you may need a suite of documents that you're being constantly referring to have them saved against on the collaboration platform, so you can persistent. So whenever you have a new meeting, the documents will be present. Now that's something that's really needed. So you can constantly refer to these documents throughout a project lifecycle. Recording your conversations or remote engagements and saving them against a client record or a project, so you can go back and cross-reference if you need to. Collaboration, sharing and collaboration. So there may be instances where you've got, I think of use cases, you may have stakeholders that are abroad. You may have stakeholders that are on holiday, but you need them to be able to go and look back at the meeting notes of what was said and actually go and see the meeting and then replay the meeting and then give their own notes as to what they believe the outcomes from that meeting have been. So full collaboration, that's something that we do as well. Reporting, super important, right? So just because you've got video conferencing tools, they are your remote meetings, and from a business perspective, you need to report against that. So how many meetings has so and so had for this customer and this time period? Current tooling doesn't provide you with that. You need this kind of stuff built into it. So that's kind of stuff that we've sort of built in to our platform. You can see some of the other elements that I won't dwell on, but they're on here as well. Again, I'll share this deck with you guys. Little oversight. Let me just get rid of that. Of our core features. Again, lots of elements on here. Some of the key elements that I think I'll just draw attention to is one, branding, so having, we're using Zoom here, as I keep referring to, but to have something which is totally branded as your own company platform for all of your remote meetings. So as opposed to having to see Neugo up here, this would be your own logo, and you can change the color palette. So it's your own color palette. So ostensibly it's your tool. That's something that's super important as well, because there's new ways of working. Remote meetings, it's, as I said, it's here to stay. So making tooling, look as if it's entirely yours, becomes part of that strategy as well. But if I just go into some of the sort of video and voice kind of toolings, I've touched on it before: booking, scheduling, and automatic reminders sent out to people. We've got virtual interactive waiting rooms, which enables you to go and engage with the people who are waiting in those rooms, and for them to go and look at documents that are going to be discussed during the upcoming virtual engagement. Group meetings. We've got integrated teleconferencing built into it as well, so you can telephone people in should they not have the technology to be able to go and access a webcam. Auto recording and transcription and dictation. So we did a lot of stuff with the Home Office about 18 months ago. Well, we did it for 3 years, but it was about 18 months, 12 months ago, where they needed to transcribe all remote conversations into a text file and save that against the recording of the meeting, so they could use it for future audit, or might even be for court cases. So we got that built in. Automatic dictation as well, so you can start to dictate, and our system will auto transcribe that audio into a text file as well. We've got that built in. Integrated direct secure messaging, and you may think, great, on this particular image here you can see there's the messaging tool, which we've all got here. There's an instant message you've got built into Zoom here, but having a separate direct messaging tool which is encrypted, that enables you a different means of communication outside of the video comms with your internal colleagues, your groups of internal colleagues, with your external clients and the likes. We've got that all built in as well. I mentioned the integrated document management. That's what we call ourselves persistent document management. I know when you're using, like I'm doing now today, I'm sharing my screen with you. So every piece of tool can share screens, and ours is no different. But having the persistent document management about project documents, client documents, case documents, whatever it may be, that's something we have as well. And these last two are some of the new technology that we're deploying. I think you guys may have asked me to talk a little bit about sort of AI or some of the adoption of it, but OCR related technology, this is kind of machine learning technology, and it's around sort of document and data extraction. The use case for this, again, we've done a lot of stuff with the Home Office, some of their suppliers, was hundreds of thousands for visa processing. Bank statements need to be assessed, and they just wanted a tool that could just extract 5 key data points from a bank statement to save their workers from having to go through each bank statement, which has all got different formatting and the like. So that's the kind of tooling, or one of the use cases we have there. AI-driven audio form filling. Again, this is all new age stuff, but we're integrating into this to help make better ways of working and remote working. But this also enables greater access to facilities and services that you may be providing. In simple terms, you present a form, and it can either be read out. The questions can either be read out to someone, or they can read it. They can answer in their chosen language, and the system will record that, present it in their chosen language, so they can edit it if they need to. And then when it finishes, they just finish, and it'll translate and transcribe it into any other language you need to. Okay, so if you've got forms that need to be filled out across the other side of the world, they can answer it in their chosen language, and it'll translate it back in for you. But for them, it makes it really simple for them to, to go through form filling, which, as we know, can be irksome at the best of times. So anyway, ideas of just some of the new features and functionality that we've got on our platform. I'll start to rush through this because I want to go on sort of Q&A as well and open up with you guys. But this is some of the user interface that we've got, which is all much contemporary. It gives you kind of a snapshot dashboard on the right-hand side. And this is one around kind of recruitments, but you get a very quick and easy snapshot of what's happening around your kind of remote interviews and the likes, and your campaigns, your recruitment campaigns. So easy to see dashboards to help you manage everything. And built into this, actually, we don't have on this screenshot, but I mentioned to you having ROI kind of counters around carbon footprint. We've also got one built into here as well, which says, since you've done X amount of meetings remotely, this is how much time you've saved. This is how much money you've saved. Okay, big ROIs. And just quickly on that, in terms of ROIs, one of our customers, King's College up in London, by using our tooling, was actually our recruitment tooling. They, in order to help them remotely interview or select and interview doctors and nurses from all over the world to help them to then come over and do the great stuff that we are benefiting from, especially over the last 2.5 years. They used our platform, and by doing so, they saved 60% of their recruitment costs and reduced their time to hire by 50%. Okay, so there's so much, because this is all numbers of the reasons for this, which I can go into perhaps in the Q&A, but things like cross-diary management and the likes, which tends to stop processes, business processes in place. Our tooling helps prevent that. Okay, some of the integrations bits of this, so those with more of a technology lean. I know there was someone from a telco perspective who might have an interest in this, but typically we can sit our Neugo platform onto any pre-existing video conferencing tooling that you have. That's it's a bold statement to make, but we're actually just right at the moment, we're just building our MS Teams app version, which should be going live towards the probably the back end of this quarter. And that'll mean that as long as you're using Microsoft Teams, you just go and find our Neugo within their marketplace, and you can then start to add the workflows around your Teams licenses to make your Teams fit for your specific business purposes. Security, I won't bore you too much detail on there, but again, safe to say we're accredited up to the hilt. You'll notice we've done stuff with the NHS, so they've got a very high level of scrutiny to be applied from a data perspective. I won't bore you too much detail on there, but we're very secure. And again, some quick summary stuff around some of the benefits. Increased in remote team productivity, we've spoken about that. Work-life balance, we've spoken about that too. Improved engagement with your customer base. It's a much more intuitive way to engage with them. It's a much easier way to engage with them. You're not insisting upon them traveling to come and see you. You can see them anywhere at any time. Hugely important. Oversight, and I'm giving some oversight. I think I gave you some oversight examples where I think it was in financial services I mentioned to you, where you might need to go and check on the work of your colleagues who might be working remotely. Are they doing what they said they were doing? Because we have a legal obligation to ensure they do. Well, you can using our platform. Okay. And then, lastly, you got reduction in operational costs. I spoke about that with King's, and carbon footprint needs no major introductions. Some of the quick comparisons. Again, I'll share this with you to save you from having to go through it all. But those are some of the main players on the left-hand side. We kind of, it's quite interesting when we do our competitive analysis, because our solution is what they call kind of blue ocean, really. There's no solution that's just doing it across any industry. There are some specific workflow type solutions for specific industry purposes, but nothing that you can use depending upon what, no matter what industry or what your use case is. So it's quite difficult to find direct competitors, but the easy stuff that people can understand when you think about remote working, you think, okay, I use Microsoft Teams, Zoom, Hangouts, whatever it may be. Okay, but as I mentioned, these tools natively don't have the extra features and workflows you need to carry out stuff remotely. And that's me. I will gladly now shut up and open up to, if you want a quick Q&A, so I'll stop sharing there as well.
Okay, superb. So thank you so much, Colin, for giving us that whistle-stop tour. Amazing piece of technology. I've got a whole load of questions, but I'll hold those for the minute, and I'll throw it open to the rest of the group. So anyone like to put any questions to Colin?
We've got one question popped by Astrid in the chat box. Astrid, do you want to put your question in?
Yeah, thank you. It looks a fantastic fix all problems, Colin, that we could frankly have done with 2020. We could have.
Yes, I know.
That up. I know. It's unhelpful, isn't it? There's an awful lot of tension out there on platforms between one-to-one, one to a few, and then one to many. And there's like a watershed where one to many in the webinar broadcast becomes some kind of other beast for which they charge a phenomenal fee. Yeah. On your very last slide, I think I saw the sort of the one to many thing. Yeah. How does Neugo handle webinars and that bigger broadcast option?
In sort of there's a number of ways of doing it. So what we're seeing some of our customers do is we've got something called a one-way video. So and there's two different ways in which you're using that. Well, one is you're asking your customers to answer questions and they kind of report back to you. But the other is where you almost do like a video blog to your customer base. So you can do almost like a static, so it's a non-interactive means of communicating, and you kind of creating this kind of almost video blog, which you can then publish to all of your customer base. Okay, so that's one way in which we would do a form of kind of a webinar. But the other is just we've got a simplified version of our video communication platform, which uses back-end legacy tooling, but effectively it enables you to just set up so you are the only presenter and you can invite as many people as you want. I mean, it's only limited really for us by the back-end video technology. So we use something called Vonage, which is our legacy tool that we use, simply because we just worked well with them. They're a US company. It just enables us to go and effectively mute every other attendee, and I'm just presenting at them. The chat bot stays open, but you can have up to 300, 400, 500 people attending. So that's kind of a way in which you can very simply start controlling the cost base, because you're right, when you start talking about webinars, and I don't know why, frankly, because I know exactly what the cost is, and I think it's absolutely ridiculous that they start charging these costs. So it's something for us, and I know this always sounds a bit obsequious when you hear software companies talking about this, but we've been working with healthcare throughout COVID. We genuinely, we generally care and want to create a solution that fits the new ways of working business-wise. And I see in this instance where people are charging astronomical sums for webinars for no reason other than the fact that it's a unique captive audience, I find difficult to swallow. So we build our tooling to make certain that it does what it should be doing, and it's fundamentally cost effective, because without those two, it becomes a bit of a moot point. Well, yeah. I hope that answers your question, does it? Yes, perfect, great. In short, yes, for our platform, you can have any unlimited amount of people pretty much on, but you want to mute them if you've got more than about 10, 20.
Excellent, thanks Astrid, thanks Colin. Okay, more questions for Colin. Rob, yeah, go for it, Rob.
Yeah, hi Colin, thank you for that, very in-depth. Not something I would require. I think Zoom and one other person is great for me, but I suppose it's a great tool for accountability, isn't it? If you're running a sales organization of any sort and they're all working from home, it's a great accountability tool where you can monitor, assess, and give feedback. And so I would presume your ideal client would be someone in recruitment, maybe, or sales, or.
So any organization where they have a form of repetitive process that needs to be followed, typically. So recruitment could be one, financial services most certainly another, but also then process where the standardized process that needs to be adhered to. Okay, so that's, if you stop and reflect, that's pretty much all industries have got something that needs to be, some process that needs to be followed. We're just on this. We're just building what we call a workflow builder, which will enable. So we have got our own perception. This is us at Neugo, our own perception of what processes need to be what is followed for remote meetings for particular industry verticals. Okay, and when you customize, when you join Neugo, you can customize your platform down to what industry you're in, and it'll present you with a different naming convention, but also standard workflows for remote meetings that we've deemed appropriate for that particular industry. But we're not as arrogant as to assume that every single person, every single organization does the same thing, right? So what we've also built is a workflow builder, or building workflow builder, which enables you, Mr. Customer, to say, okay, thank you for giving us these standard processes, but we actually do things slightly differently here. For our remote meetings, for example, there might be some team within your organization, they don't need video. All they do is document validation. So you'll create a workflow that says engage with a customer in a customer uploads document, validate document, sign off document, do auto signature stuff, end of assignment. Okay, so but that workflow builder, it becomes really adaptive to your own business operations. So to answer your question, what is our target customer? It really is as broad as any organizations that have got process flows, standard operational process flows in the way that they carry out their businesses, which is pretty much anyone and everyone. But then also those organizations that are looking to go and roll out a kind of at least hybrid, or if not hybrid, then sort of, remote, flexible working environment, then we come into play massively with that. Albeit we've actually had customers not using it for remote purposes, using it just when they're in the office, but it's just a tool to help monitor those meetings you're having with your clients who might be the other side of the country or the other side of the world.
Yeah, I was going to say, it wasn't for me, obviously. We're using Zoom here today, but as you said, it can be in-house. It can be just for those internal meetings. And I like the workflow process, because to simplify things and streamline things and make things more automated just speeds up and creates that productivity, doesn't it?
Completely, and you hit the nail on the head. So I mentioned Kings, who we've worked for years with, and they benefited massively from our automated workflows that got built into the platform. So what I mean by that is that when certain stages are met, it triggers actions to go and get the next stage happening. So rather than us waiting and sitting because it's at the bottom of someone's inbox, you're getting alerts, and you can turn those alerts to being daily until the task has happened, or hourly if you really wanted to be a pest. But you can configure it as you need to make certain that speeds everything up. So one of the big things that they found was finding a doctor in India. That's half the challenge. Getting them onboarded and getting all their documentation validated, that's a 3-month process typically. And they found that was being reduced to a matter of weeks by using our platform.
Wow.
So yeah. It's powerful stuff, and then there's all sorts of great stuff we can do, which we're starting, because we're constantly developing. We've got a very good R&D department, so we're constantly looking to bring in, I touched on it in the presentation, some of the new AI-driven tooling that you can start to plug in to simplify working practices. And there's always, I think, well, not always, sometimes there's a kind of a knee-jerk reaction when you mention AI and people think, oh Christ, it's going to be taking everyone's jobs. The way that we're building it, I think the way the vast majority of technology companies are looking to build it, is more of an assistant. It's there to go and help and make, give you back time to do the things that you really are great at doing. So rather than having to go and deal with the kind of minutiae that perhaps is more administrative, that an AI type tool can manage for you.
I see Microsoft invested heavily in that new AI technology.
Yeah.
What
CGTP.
Oh,
it does. Yes, it can write a covering letter for you for your job applications and stuff. Kind of.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's yeah. And
thank you, Colin. Thank you.
No problem at all.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Rob. Okay. Anyone else? Questions for Colin?
Could I ask a question around costing? Again, someone having a kind of a Zoom product or something similar, do you have one price fits all, or do you have different packages depending on customers' requirements?
Exactly, the latter, precisely that. I mean, I just literally just this morning, we're just working with a large consortium of in Devon for healthcare, and they're price sensitive. It's within the NHS, and we all know the NHS is stretched massively. So, to the point that I think I alluded to before, we will not let pricing affect, and within reason, obviously, but we won't let pricing affect the decision of people to go and buy. So yes, we can customize it. In broad, simple terms, though, it's usually on a per user per month basis. Which is typical SaaS kind of business model, right? Software as a service business model. But yes, entirely flexible. So it's kind of entry level packages, which is really cost effective, up to the all singing or dancing.
Lovely, thanks, Elaine. Any more questions for Colin? Okay,
I might have missed it, but what's the sign behind you mean, Flabba?
Oh, so so Flabba's our company. So that's the limited company. So Neugo is our new branding for all of our solutions. So yeah, just to confuse the hell out of you guys, right? So Flabba is our limited liability company. Neugo is our suite of products. So all of the sales activity and everything is done under Neugo. It's the new way of working. So Neugo, it's kind of apt.
And with Neugo, can a basic user basically kind of subscribe online to it, put in their CRM system now and kind of get going with it, or do they need interface with you guys, go, right, what are you looking for, what are you trying to achieve, etc., etc.?
No, so we're just about, so we literally just beginning of this year so launched the new website to Neugo. The self-serve commercials is due to be launched in February, which effectively means you just select your package and yes, you subscribe, and actually then you get your logins, and then it takes you intuitively through, like, okay, what industry are you in? What branding do you want? Do you want to keep standard Neugo branding? Do you want to use your own branding? And then when you start, it starts to say, okay, great, welcome. Now, these are the things you need to do to try and set yourself up. So it takes you through. It's really intuitive. I mean, the idea is it's built upon me being a Luddite. So if I can do it, then everyone can do it, right? That's kind of the way we designed it.
Obviously, my industry being the energy market, contracts, etc., I find it more productive now, obviously on Zoom, to be able to get hold of a director and say, right, let me run through some quotes with you now. We can get the documentation signed, and it'd be great to have that kind of system where it reminds me, oh, you said you're going to chase them up on some. At the moment, I'm using Google, and other platforms.
Yeah.
It kind of gets, and good old bits of paper. It kind of gets a bit like, how can I become more productive? And
the system would do exactly that, based upon the workflows. It would also, we've got a digital signing element as well, so you can upload. So in your instance, you can upload the contract to the profile of the customer, and you can get them to sign it digitally, so it speeds up the process massively. And then you've got a store of that, so you don't have to go and send our stuff out. And I mean, one of the big things that when we first started working with Kings years ago, they had, it sounds similar to your operational stuff, but Kings, they were being killed by email overload and losing emails with valuable, important data in it. Sending important, valuable data over email, that's a massive no-no, as we all know now, for security purposes. And also Excel hell. They just had Excel spreadsheets all over the place trying to manage everything. So that the whole purpose of our, the kind of genesis moment of our evolution really was around trying to solve all that, tidy up the whole processes around day-to-day business workflows.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Colin, I have a question.
Yes.
I've worked a lot with large corporations over my career, and have come up against the amount of approvals required around bringing in any kind of new software. How are you finding that? Because what you're talking about here has a lot of touch points into an organization, and I can almost hear some CIOs quaking in their boots at the thought. So just really interested to know how you've managed to get past that.
So, I mean, the most regulatory, the most, I guess, perhaps structured, you could argue, would be perhaps the legal profession, and they tend to go and scrutinize absolutely everything. We've done work with them. It depends on the price point at which they want to go and acquire as well. So sometimes you can come underneath the radar and they can use it as a kind of almost a proof of concept, as it were, if it goes underneath the spending criteria from a procurement perspective. So that becomes really simple and easy. They can just acquire very quick and easy, and then you kind of land and expand with them. But in short, I think what the pain points that they're experiencing, and this is the CIO type suite typically, or the CTO suite at the moment, they're getting a lot of issues pushed their way around how can we make working remotely better and more efficient. So they're far more open to going and trying out new systems, regardless of how it might sit in their real estate or their software real estate as it currently stands, because they just need to answer these problems because they're getting harangued by the business to solve these problems. So it is always, when you're looking at enterprise sales, it's a sort of trade-off between the size of the project and then procurement, and then the elements around compliance and governance as well, and making certain that everything sort of fits into their infrastructure estate properly. But we solve an awful lot of their major headaches because we're SaaS, we're cloud-based. We're highly secure. I mean, I went through some of the security elements they had there. So we've been stressed and tested to a central government level. So we satisfy them with an awful lot of perhaps the initial pushbacks you would get when looking to go and adopt new technology anyway. I think the main elements that's overcoming perhaps some of the concerns that you may have seen historically is the fact that this is such an acute thing. People are desperate to go and get proper working remote working tooling nailed down properly, so they're happy to go and look at other toolings to go and help manage that problem.
Okay.